Welcome to our 2019 webinar series. Our 2019 monthly webinars will include client stories, your client stories, and how those stories can help you and other clients in this year and beyond. Each webinar will last about 50 minutes, and you must be logged on for a full 50 minutes in order to receive CFP credit. Please be sure to ask questions as you have them by typing them into the question box. We'll answer all questions at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our website within a week in case you missed it. And throughout 2019, loyal fans will receive 10 CFP CE credits, one for each month. Today's presenter has been a part of LLIS since 2009. She handles many of your clients' life cases, disability, long-term care, and annuities. And since 2014, she has been supervising our very busy new business team. And now, Jennifer Stiles.
Thank you, Claudia. Today we'll be talking about unlocking the secrets of underwriting. We'll go over the purpose of underwriting. We'll talk about some of the quoting systems, the difference between some of the online quoting systems and the LLIS quoting system. And then I'll take you through the application process from start to finish. But first, let's talk about the purpose of underwriting. Underwriting is assessing and classifying the degree of risk an insured represents to the insurance company. The underwriter is going to review a lot of information about the client and decide whether to accept or decline that risk. Obviously, the higher the risk, the higher the premium. Now, here's a group of insureds that represent a similar level of risk to the insurance company. And when it comes to underwriting approvals, I like to think of them as buckets. There are predetermined conditions you must meet in order to fit into those buckets, and there's predetermined premium prices associated with those buckets. And that's what allows us to accurately quote different companies. Now, the preferred plus, preferred, and standard plus approvals, those are considered preferred approvals. These are people that have longer than average life expectancy. So they're all excellent offers. A standard approval is average life expectancy. And then below that are substandard ratings or table ratings. And the way those work is that with depending on the company, it's like table A, table B, table C, or table 1, 2, 3. Some use the letters, some use the numbers. But each table rating is 25% higher than the standard approval. So if the standard premium is $1,000 and $1,000 a year, and somebody was approved at table A, it would be 25% higher. So their premium would be $1,250. Table B would be 50% higher, so it would be $1,500, and so on. There are anywhere from 10 to 15 table ratings. And then there's flat extras. We also have that as well. We don't see that too often, but you may see that with somebody who had previous cancer. So they may say, well, we're going to approve this person at standard rates, but we're going to tack on an extra $3 per thousand of coverage. And some of those flat extras, they're temporary flat extras, and some are for the life of the policy. And then every once in a while, we'll see an exclusion rider. That's very common in disability insurance, but we also see it in life insurance as well. And that would be more like aviation, or if somebody's, a private pilot, or somebody does skydiving. And if the insurance company is not willing to make an offer, then the client is declined. Now, within these buckets, there's male and female rates. Women tend to live longer, so our life insurance premiums are going to be lower than men's. And then there's also smoker and non-smoker rates. Smoker rates are anywhere from 3 to 4 times the non-smoker version. Now let's talk about some of the quoting system. Here we have Calvin. He's age 40. He works out. He eats healthy. So he needs $1 million of life insurance. So he goes online to a search engine such as this and fills out some very basic information. And what shows up for him are these premiums, for Preferred Plus, which is the best approval for $1 million 20-year term at age 40. Now, in the insurance industry for life insurance, everybody starts out at preferred plus rates when the underwriter is looking at that. But obviously, there may be certain situations that knock somebody out of that. And so Calvin applies for insurance, and it turns out his cholesterol ratio is 6.0. So as you can see, that knocked him out of preferred plus with every single insurance company. And you could see how his premium jumped up. Some of those new premiums may have been preferred rates, some may be standard based upon that because different insurance companies have different underwriting guidelines. But Calvin also likes to smoke marijuana or vape at 1 to 2 times per week. So as you can see, that really knocked them out of more categories as well. And you can see how like Minnesota Life, look at that, jumped up from 839 to $6,300. Minnesota Life must be considering him a smoker. That's why it jumped up so much. But Lincoln stayed the same. He would still be eligible for the $763 a year. So that would be the best company for him. Now, you may say, well, maybe he should apply with all the companies. There's 6 companies there. Let's have Calvin apply for all 6 of the companies and see which offers come back the best and accept that offer. Shop around, right? Well, shopping around for quotes is a great idea. Applying for multiple insurance companies at the same time actually negatively affects the underwriting process. And we'll go into detail about that a little bit later on in the presentation. It also costs the insurance company time and money. We feel so strongly about this that if a client comes to us and currently has a pending application with another agent and another insurance company, we will not submit an application for insurance. And the reason being is we don't want to negatively affect what they have going on now. Now, that's not to say that if that person gets an approval that they're not happy with, by all means, circle back to us and we'll see what we can do and we'll see if we can improve on that offer. So let LLIS do the shopping for you and your clients. We can also streamline the application process if your client's applying for multiple products like life and disability insurance. We can make sure that they only need to have the one exam done. Now let's take a look at LLIS quoting system. If you go to our website and log on and you request a life insurance quote, this is what you're going to see. We're going to ask some lifestyle type questions. We'll ask some health questions. And as you can see, it goes on to the next screen, a lot of health questions, right? And then the third screen also asks family history questions. Now, sometimes people may say, whoa, that's a lot of questions just to get a quote. And it is. But if your client doesn't have any issues, it really is not a big deal to say no, 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 no. If they do have some of these, well, we need to know that information. Remember, our quotes are only as good as the information given to us. So if anything, I recommend that you have your clients fill this out and not to have financial advisors because, realistically, how much do you really know about somebody's family history or health situation? So we want to get some, valid information up front. So even though it takes a little bit of time to do the quoting system at LLIS, it ends up saving a lot of time and money in the long run. Now let's go through the application process. We're going to start with the preliminary stage. This is the stage where we do kind of our pre-underwriting. If a client logs on and does a quote request, okay, that is going to be reviewed by one of our advisor services team member. We do everything we can to avoid surprises when it comes to applying for insurance. So that information is going to be reviewed by the advisor services team member here at LLIS, and that's the person who is the expert on the product that your client is applying for. We would deal with probably 30 different insurance companies throughout the country. We have their guidelines. Some are more generous than others, as we saw in Calvin's situation, right? So we take that into consideration when reviewing your client's information. If we need some more details, we'll reach out to the client to get those details. And then once we have enough details, we'll go ahead and send the quotes to the client with a copy to the financial advisor. The client may review it and say, yeah, this looks good, let's move forward. So the next step is we're going to gather more information. You know, we gather a lot of information for the quote, but we're not going to ask social security number, beneficiary information, anything like that just to get a quote. But we do need that for the application. So we'll gather some more details. We'll also do a brief phone interview with their designated LLIS case manager. And at that time, the case manager will also explain the application process. And sometimes during this phone interview, we find information out that we weren't aware of. But most of the time, well, you know, when the client is doing the phone interview with the case manager, they need to understand that we're going to be confidential with their information, but they also need to be completely transparent and detailed in their answers. Like I said, our quotes are only as good as the information that we get. Most of the time after the phone interview, the advisor services team member is going to review the information again. And most of the time, it's a quick confirmation email that is sent to the client saying, you know, we recommend this company, and the client may move forward. But every once in a while, we find something out that it's not super clear on which company to recommend and which approval class. Say you had a client who was diagnosed 6 years ago with breast cancer, had a mastectomy, had chemotherapy for 2 years, but has been cancer free for the past 4 years. Well, those type of details, we're not sure exactly how to quote. So what we do is we'll do an x-ray. An x-ray is when we send information anonymously, so we don't, use the client's name or anything, to multiple insurance companies and say, hey, how would you tentatively approve this client based upon this information? So you may have some companies that will come back and say decline. We may have postpones. We may have table ratings. We may have one or two companies that may come back and say, well, how about standard? We would approve them at standard rates as long as their last mammogram was normal. So in those situations, we would recommend a particular company. We don't want to waste our time moving forward with a company that's going to decline them for insurance. And then when we submit an application, we actually send a copy of this x-ray, kind of linking the application with this. So remember, we didn't use their name. So now we're saying, hey, you said you would consider standard rates. So they're more inclined to, stick with that offer. So the client gets revised quotes, or maybe the same quotes they were originally given. And they say, this looks good, let's move forward. So now we're moving into the pending stage. This is the stage where underwriting technically begins. Everything up until this part was pre-underwriting. This was our LLIS doing their due diligence to find the best company at the best premium for your clients. But at the pending stages is when an application is actually submitted to the insurance company and they go through full underwriting. Like I said, the underwriter is going to review a lot of information about the client, and they get their information from many sources, including the application, the medical exam, the motor vehicle report, the Medical Information Bureau, the prescription database, medical records, and a possible additional phone interview. Now I'm going to go over each one of these in a little more detail. That's a lot of information there. So the first thing the underwriter is going to see is the application. The application is going to have demographic information, name, address, date of birth, beneficiary information. There's going to be health questions on there as well. Lifestyle type questions. We ask about how much somebody drinks, whether they use drugs, skydive, how many speeding tickets in the past 5 years. Then there's family history questions. We ask questions about parents and siblings. Anybody been diagnosed or died of cancer or heart disease prior to age 60? And there is a bit of financial underwriting for life insurance as well. So we do ask somebody's net worth and their income as well. They will also have typically a medical exam. They're going to have blood work done. They'll have a urinalysis done. They'll have 3 blood pressure readings and height and weight. And sometimes some of the same medical questions we asked will be asked by the examiner. Now, I have to tell you, here at LLIS, the majority of offers that come back different than quoted are due to something that happened during the exam. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time um, on the exam and, what's all involved in the blood work? What are they looking for? What does it mean if you have an elevation in this lab? So we'll go over some of those details as well. So when you apply for insurance, the underwriter is looking for organ damage. And the 3 main organs are the heart, liver, and kidneys. So we'll start off with the heart. Most people know what the heart does. It pumps oxygenated blood through the arteries to organs and tissues, and it brings the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. The main test, or the most common test that is run, is cholesterol. I'm sure everybody here has heard of cholesterol, and cholesterol has actually gotten a bad rap. We need cholesterol to survive. It's essential in brain function. It aids in digestion, and it also is a requirement for our bodies to make the sex hormones estrogen and testosterone. So the fact that I'm female and have breasts is partly due to cholesterol. Now, there are 2 types of cholesterol: the HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol. That's actually a protection factor. And then there's the LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol. Your doctor may say, hey, we want that HDL number to be higher, so they may tell you to do some cardio exercise. Alcohol can also raise your HDL. Not that your doctor's, telling you to drink more alcohol, but it does raise the HDL. But the tricky thing is, if you raise the HDL, you're also raising the total cholesterol. So more and more insurance companies are not just looking at that total cholesterol number, but they're looking at the cholesterol over HDL ratio, and that should be under 5. We also need triglycerides that aids in metabolism. And that should be under 150. That can be elevated in people who have obesity, diabetes, and alcohol consumption. Now, the great thing about our body, our human body is an amazing thing. The great thing about it is that we make all the cholesterol and triglycerides that we need in order to survive. Where it gets a bad reputation is when we eat high fatty foods, it raises those numbers. And that can cause blockages in our arteries, and we don't want that to happen. You'll also notice that I have alcohol highlighted in red for HDL cholesterol and triglycerides, and it's because we're going to refer back to that in a few minutes. Now let's take a look at 2 companies for life insurance and how they view cholesterol. Company A, you can get a preferred plus offer with a total cholesterol of 220, which is slightly elevated, should be under 200, as long as your ratio is 5.0 or lower. Company B, you can get preferred plus with a 300, which is extremely elevated, but your ratio has to be 4.5 or lower. So as you can see, Company B almost doesn't even care about the total cholesterol, but they're extremely strict about the ratio. So they're putting a lot more emphasis on that. Now, if you applied for insurance 10 years ago and you were 50 years old applying for $1 million, you probably needed to have an EKG done. More and more insurance companies are getting rid of the EKG requirement in lieu of additional blood tests. And the first one is the NT-proBNP. This, if you have an elevation in this lab result, you will probably have a rated or declined policy. An elevation of this lab result is an indication that maybe your left ventricle, which is part of your heart, it's one of the chambers of your heart, maybe the left ventricle is stretched, maybe you have an enlarged heart, or the chambers aren't working properly, or you have blockages. It's not saying which thing is happening. You would actually need to have like an echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound of your heart to really see what's going on. It's just saying to the underwriter, hey, the heart's not working at 100% here. Then there's the C reactive protein test. This measures inflammation. An elevation in this also can result in a rated or declined policy. An elevation indicates that you're at increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease. It's not saying you have it now, but that you're at increased risk. Remember, the underwriter is taking a snapshot of your health right now and trying to determine what are the chances that this situation is going to get worse in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, depending on the life of the policy. So the concern for the underwriter is if you're at higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease, if your heart's not working at 100%, or you could have blockages that obviously could lead to a heart attack or stroke. So that's the concern there. Now let's talk about the liver. The liver is the largest internal organ in your body. I say internal because your skin is actually an organ, and that's the largest organ. But the largest internal organ in your body is the liver. And you can see there where it's located. The liver has well over 200 functions. It's pretty amazing. It's a busy organ, right? Now, most of the functions are divided into three main categories. The first one is it detoxifies your blood. It does this by breaking down medications, drugs, and alcohol. Fun little fact, an adult human liver processes an ounce of alcohol an hour. So a college student who may go to a party and they're doing a couple shots, maybe going and playing beer pong, they're putting a lot more than an ounce of alcohol in their body per hour. So their liver's trying to break down all this alcohol, but it can't keep up with it. So basically, that person becomes intoxicated. Our body has two protection factors when it comes to this. If we've had too much to drink, we either pass out or we throw up. If for some reason you don't pass out or throw up and you continue drinking alcohol, you can go into alcohol poisoning, which can cause organ damage and you can die. We've probably all heard of stories where a college student is rushing for fraternity and they've overdid it with the alcohol and that student died. Very, very sad, but you can die from too much alcohol. Your liver also manufactures important proteins. One of the important proteins is things for clotting factors. So the fact that we cut ourselves and don't bleed to death is partly due to proteins that are made in the liver. The liver also makes cholesterol and triglycerides. So when I said that our body makes all the cholesterol and triglycerides we need, that happens in the liver. It also makes bile that helps break down fats and many other things as well. The liver is also a huge storage unit. Um, when we eat food, if we don't need those carbs right now or proteins or vitamins, it's stored in our liver so that it's available when we do need it. So it stores all those type of things, and so that it's a very important organ when it comes to that. Now let's talk about some of the liver function tests because this is run on 100% of the people applying for life insurance. These four are all found in the liver. An elevation in any of these could be an indication of liver damage. But some of these are found in other areas of your body, like the first one, ALP, is found in bones. So this is normally elevated in children, pregnant women, and if you had a recent bone fracture, because in all three situations, you're building bone, right? So if somebody applies for insurance and that woman is pregnant and that's the only liver function that's slightly elevated, well, the underwriter may not be super concerned about that. They may just chalk it up to being due to the fact that she's pregnant. And then the AST, the second one, this is found in cardiac and skeletal muscles. It can also be elevated after prolonged exercise, strenuous exercise. So we always recommend that a client not do any strenuous exercise 24 hours prior to the exam. And I'm not talking about somebody going for a walk around the block or a bike ride. I'm talking marathon runners. I'm talking heavy weight lifters. When you lift heavy weights, you're ripping your muscle fiber and then it repairs. And you rip and it repairs. That's why you're never supposed to lift weights 2 days in a row because you need that extra day for it to repair. And when it repairs, it gets bigger. That's how we bulk up. But in that process of ripping that muscle fiber, you're releasing this enzyme. And then the last two are only found in the liver. Now, if your ALT and your GGT are elevated and your HDL cholesterol and your triglycerides, the underwriter's pretty sure you got an issue with alcohol. Now, when you apply for insurance, your blood stays at the lab for a month. So there are standard tests that are run. But that doesn't mean that if there's an elevation, the underwriter can go back to the lab and tell the lab, run these additional tests. And we've been seeing more and more of this in the past 2 years, where they run this carbohydrate deficient transferrin test. Now, if this tests positive, you will have a rated or a declined policy. It has to be pretty high to be considered a positive test. But if it does test positive, it's an indication that you've had, on average, 4 or more drinks every day for the past 2 weeks. So they're looking for heavy alcohol use. They'll also run a hepatitis panel, which is, inflammation of the liver. That's an additional test they may run. They run HIV. That's run 100% of the time. That's not something they'll go back and run, but wanted to put that on the slide as well. And then they also run as a standard test your total protein and your albumin and globulin, which are two parts of the protein. Elevations in these could be an indication of liver or kidney disease. Low levels give it an indication to the underwriter that you may be a little malnourished. So either way, whether it's high, it could be an issue. If it's low, it could be an issue as well. And the concern here is if your nutrition is not great and your liver's not functioning well and that liver has over 200 functions, then it can't detoxify your blood and it can't store essential nutrients or make clotting factors and things like that. And that certainly can be an indication, of your longevity. Now let's take a brief look at the kidneys. Kidneys filter and balance your blood. Um, you have two kidneys. You can see there where they're located in your body. You can live with one kidney. Selena Gomez 2 years ago was diagnosed with lupus and was going into kidney failure, so she needed a kidney transplant, and her best friend actually donated a kidney. So they each now have one healthy kidney. Each kidney has well over 1 million tubes in it, and the blood is going through, and those tubes are filtering the blood. So it's pretty amazing that the kidneys can filter blood with 1 million tubes in there. But not only does it filter your blood, it balances your blood. Anyone who has a swimming pool knows how hard it can be at times to balance the chemicals in your pool. Imagine being your kidneys with all the food and alcohol and medications we take, and those little organs there are trying to balance everything. And one of the main things that it balances or regulates is your blood pressure. Um, a normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. The top number is the systolic number. That's how much pressure is being put on your artery walls when your heart is actually beating. The lower number is the diastolic, and that's how much pressure is being put on the artery walls when your heart is at rest or in between beats. So it's systolic, diastolic, systolic, diastolic. That's kind of how that works. Now, your kidneys are regulating things and balancing things. If you have too much fluid in your blood, it will get rid of some of that extra fluid through your urine. Okay. Um, if you have too much sodium or salt, we've all had situations like that. You have Chinese food for lunch. In the afternoon, you're just drinking, drinking, drinking water. You can't even quench your thirst. That's because your kidneys kind of releasing a hormone telling you that we need to dilute the sodium, if you will. Now, drinking water is not a problem. We need water to survive. But And we've all had that. You have something salty, right? You drink a lot of water, you feel bloated, your fingers are swollen, can't get your wedding ring on, or whatever the case may be. And that extra fluid actually puts more pressure on the artery walls. And that's why if somebody's diagnosed with high blood pressure, the first thing the doctor says is eat a low sodium diet. Your kidneys also regulate red blood cell production. Um, you have millions of red blood cells. On the cells, you have molecules called hemoglobin, and that's what oxygen attaches to. That's the only way oxygen is transported through our body. So if you get in a car accident and lose a lot of blood, that could be a very significant issue. If you lose too much blood, you need to have a blood transfusion. But maybe you lost a little bit of blood, or what's not too uncommon with women during their menstruation, if they have a heavy flow, they become anemic. In those type of situations, your kidneys are going to say, "Hey, the red blood cell here is a little low. We need some more." So it releases a hormone that tells our bones, our bone marrow, because that's where red blood cells are made, that we need more red blood cells. Okay. Um, Calcium. We've all heard of calcium when you're a kid. Drink your milk. It's good for your bones. It's good for your teeth. What you may not realize is calcium is essential for muscle contraction. And just think, our most important muscle, or one of our most important muscles, is our heart. So it's a real issue if you don't have calcium. So if the kidneys are measuring this and we're a little low on the calcium, it's going to release a hormone and take the calcium from your bones. And that then you start getting osteoporosis, brittle bones, you're more prone to bone fracture. So calcium is an important mineral as well. Now let's talk about some of the kidney function tests. The first one's your blood glucose. This is how much sugar is in your blood at the time of sample. Okay. We recommend that people fast at least 6 to 8 hours because we don't want that number to be too high. But they also may test the fructosamine, which is the average blood sugar over the past few weeks, or even more so than that, is the hemoglobin A1C, which is the average blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months. Um, Anybody who's a diabetic knows that they can't just eat candy every day and then 2 days before having blood work, they eat a healthy diet because they know that their doctor is testing that hemoglobin A1C. And their doctor's going to say, your sugars have not been regulated. So there's no cheating with that. Diabetes, very significant thing in underwriting. So I'm not diabetic. If I eat a candy bar, my pancreas is going to release a hormone called insulin. That insulin attaches to the glucose and pulls it into the cells so that the cell can use that sugar or that glucose for energy. In diabetics, their pancreas either doesn't produce any insulin. So in those situations, you got to test your blood sugar a couple times a day. And then you got to give insulin shots. So you're manually putting that hormone in your body. Or maybe you're making some insulin, but not enough. Or you may be making insulin, but for some reason the cells are resistant to it. So it's not allowing the glucose to go into the cells. So what happens? That glucose is just floating in the bloodstream. Too much glucose. Now, where it's significant is that too much glucose in your bloodstream for a long period of time destroys those million tubes in your kidneys. That's why diabetics towards the end of their life have to go on dialysis. Dialysis, if your kidneys are not functioning right, you have to have dialysis. You're hooked up to a machine that basically filters your blood for you. So it's very important to have regulated sugars. In addition to destroying those tubes, it causes damage to your arteries and veins. So that's a significant thing as well. So diabetics are prone to heart issues, circulation issues, uh, strokes, kidney failure. So that's the significance with that. Now, because your kidneys filter your blood and get rid of waste through your urine, what shows up in the urine can be an indication of kidney health, right? So some of the tests they run is glucose in your urine. You should never have glucose in your urine. In fact, if you do, it's the first sign of diabetes. It's either your kidneys are not working correctly and it's accidentally spilling into your urine, or your kidneys are saying, "Whoa, there's way too much glucose here that's floating around for long periods of time, and we're trying to get rid of some of this to protect the rest of the body." Um, Protein. You will have a little bit of protein in your urine, but elevations could be, again, an indication that your kidneys are accidentally spilling too much protein. It could also be due to strenuous workout. Remember when I said when you do that heavy weight lifting and you're excuse me, and you're ripping those muscle fibers and releasing that enzyme, you're also producing more protein there with extreme exercise. Um, if you have elevations, there's creatinine, and then they'll take a look at the protein creatinine ratio as well. And microalbumin, that's part of the protein. That's the first sign of kidney disease. And white blood cells and red blood cells. You should not have white blood cells or red blood cells in your urine. If you do, the underwriter will probably request a repeat urinalysis. There are situations, maybe you have a urinary tract infection, a kidney stone. Women, if they are examined during their menstruation, will have red blood cells in the urine. So we always recommend not to be examined during that time of the month. So the underwriter will probably request a repeat just to make sure, is this something significant with the kidney, or is this just, one of those fluke results? So in addition to doing the medical test, they're also going to test for nicotine. If you have nicotine in your system, you will get smoker rates. So like I said previously, smoker rates can be 3 to 4 times the non smoker version. Even if you're on a nicotine patch, an underwriter cannot tell the difference between nicotine in your urine, whether it's coming from a patch, Nicorette gum, or whether you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So you will get smoker rates. However, if we know that information ahead of time, and we do ask about that before applying, if we do know that somebody's on the nicotine patch, there is 1 or 2 companies we can go to and we can get non-smoker rates. They won't get preferred plus rates, but at least they'll get the non-smoker version. Then there's drugs. A couple years, probably 10 years ago, if you applied for insurance, the only drug that they pretty much tested at that point was probably cocaine. More and more insurance companies are doing full drug panels. And one drug in particular I'd like to talk about is marijuana. Marijuana use is the number one quickest changing thing in underwriting right now. It's legal in multiple states for recreational use and even more states for medicinal use. So if somebody has used marijuana in the past year, we need to know details. We need to know what form. I may be dating myself, but when I was in college, you pretty much smoked it. That's all you did. Well, now it comes in drops and liquids and brownies and you name it, it's out there. So we need to know what form, how often, last time used, and for what reason. Is it recreational or is it medicinal? And with that information, we'll need to do an x-ray. And it, depending on those answers, it can run the gamut from preferred plus to decline. That's how different the insurance companies are and how they're viewing things, but it's an ever changing thing. The concern for marijuana use, well, first of all, it doesn't matter what state you live in. They're not going to say, oh, you live in Colorado, no problem, it's legal there. But at the same time, they're not going to look at somebody like myself who lives in Florida and say, you live in Florida, it's not legal there for recreational use. So they're not going to penalize me and cut some slack for somebody who lives in Colorado. Even though it's legal in multiple states, it's still against federal law. So everybody is underwritten the same exact way no matter where you live. Now, the concern for the underwriter with marijuana use is that There's not a lot of data out there on how marijuana affects your longevity. There's also not a lot of data out there on how marijuana interacts with other medications. So now that it's legal in multiple states, I'm sure there's a lot of research being done on that. I guarantee 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it may be a very different situation in the insurance industry. Now, sometimes I get clients that will say, "Oh, I used marijuana 3 weeks ago. Is it going to show up in my system?" And I can't answer that question because marijuana, the active ingredient in that, THC, is fat soluble. So what that means is you smoke a joint or eat a brownie, that THC is absorbed in your fat and it's released over a longer period of time. So it really depends on how often you use it, how much fat is on your body, and the speed of your metabolism. So there's so many factors there. If somebody smoked a joint once in their life and it was a month ago, it's probably out of their system. I don't know. But if somebody quit a month ago who was smoking it every day for the past 2 years, it's going to take months to get out of their system. So as you can see, there's a lot of varying factors there. Sometimes I get the question, I just had my physical with my doctor. Um, can we use those labs instead of being examined? And that's a very good question, but the answer is no. As you can see here, there are a lot of labs that your doctor runs that the insurance company is also testing for. But what's highlighted in yellow there are additional tests that the insurance company is running that your doctor is not. I mean, my doctor doesn't typically test for HIV or nicotine or drugs at my annual physical. So we do need to have the person examined. And I would like to spend a moment talking about the differences between doctors and underwriters because we get this all the time. If I had a dollar every time somebody said to me, if my doctor's not concerned about my cholesterol, then why should the underwriter be? Well, the reason being is, say I go to my regular annual physical and my cholesterol is 220, okay, slightly elevated. My doctor's probably going to say, it's a little high, maybe do some exercise, eat a low fat diet, come back in 6 months, we can retest it, or we'll retest it next year at your regular physical, and we'll see about putting you on medication then, right? The insurance company doesn't have that luxury. They're taking a snapshot of your health now and trying to determine what are the chances that this is going to get worse in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. Not only that, unlike your doctor, the insurance company's on the hook for $2 million or $3 million or whatever it is you're applying for. So, and the insurance company is going to be much more strict than your doctor because your doctor can treat you over time. Remember, doctors are in the business of treating health. Insurance companies are in the business of risk selection. So remember, think back when I did the slide on cholesterol and that company B that was allowing you to get preferred plus rates with a total cholesterol of 300, which was pretty high, as long as your ratio was 4.5 or lower. Well, Quest Diagnostics and in the industry in general, a normal ratio is anything below 5.0. So if you had a ratio of 4.7, which is still well within normal range of the lab company, you're not eligible for Preferred Plus with that insurance company. You could get preferred, but not Preferred Plus. So the insurance companies have different guidelines than the labs, than your doctor may. And so I just wanted to talk about that briefly. Medical records. We always say this is the bane of our existence here at LLIS. This is the longest part of underwriting. It typically can take 30 to 60 days to get to receive medical records. Um, a lot of people don't understand that. They say, oh, well, just have the underwriter or the insurance company request my records from Dr. Smith. What they may not realize is that, first of all, the insurance company doesn't order the records directly. They use third party vendors such as Exam One to handle the medical record process. What most people also don't realize is most doctors don't handle the medical record. I'd say probably in what we deal with, maybe 1 in 100 actually copy the records themselves at their doctor's office. So most use a copy service. And we're not talking like a Kinko's down the street. These copy services are dealing with doctors throughout the whole country. So the way it works is the insurance company is going to say, okay, we need to order Dr. Jones' records. So they'll send the request to Exam One. Exam One is going to send that authorization that the client already signed with the application to Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith's going to send the request to his copy service. Now, these copy services, some of them say that it takes 20 days to even log in the request. It's crazy. Once they get to that request and are working on it, they count how many pages and then they'll send an invoice to the insurance company's third party vendor because they're not going to copy these for free, right? So, Exam One, once they get that invoice, will pay for those records on behalf of the insurance company. And then the copy service will send the records to that third party that will then send them to the underwriter for review. Um, Sometimes if your doctor has electronic records, it may go a little bit quicker because they can upload them electronically. Some copy services accept credit card payments, so that part can go a little bit quicker. But if a copy service requires a check that needs to be mailed, and if they're physically photocopying the records and mailing them, as you can see, this could take a long time. And then the underwriter may say, oh, well, we saw Dr. Smith's records and I see that Jenny had a colonoscopy done 2 months ago and there were some polyps removed. Well, now we need to order the gastroenterology records to get those results of the colonoscopy. And we start the process over. So as you can see, this is can be very frustrating for clients, for advisors. It's certainly frustrating for us as well, um, on how long it can take to get those records. They're going to order the motor vehicle report. You know, this is the number one hazardous activity that everybody does on a daily basis. We don't even think twice about getting in a car. But what they're looking for are speeding tickets, DUIs, any suspensions, um, things like that. So they do order your motor vehicle report when you apply for life insurance. And then the Medical Information Bureau. So this is the database that tracks applications, submitted applications. This is where I said, you know, we're not going to submit multiple applications because the insurance company, if Calvin applied with those 6 companies, they're going to see those applications out there. And Calvin essentially could place $6 million of insurance. And so the underwriter may actually decline the client based upon that. So we don't want that to happen. They want to make sure that the client is not overinsured. Or they may say, okay, well, we'll make an offer and the client may need to sign an amendment or something like that saying they're only placing the one policy. So again, we recommend not to submit multiple applications. Let us do the shopping for you. This database also protects against fraud. Say somebody applied for insurance, got smoker rates, and said, oh, I'm not paying this premium. It's way too high. So what I'm going to do is quit smoking, apply with another agent, and say, no, I have never smoked. Well, they're going to see the client applied 2 months ago and got smoker rates. So it protects against fraud, which protects the insurance company, but it also protects all of us, the consumer, because, you know, in the long run, who ends up paying for this but the consumer through our premiums. They're going to run your name through a prescription database. They're looking for prescriptions that have been filled in the past 5 years. Prescriptions are typically coded like green medications or something an underwriter is not even going to be concerned about, like a random antibiotic or Tamiflu, something like that. Then there's yellow medications. Those are ones that they may question if that medication isn't on the application. That would be an anxiety, depression med, narcotics, something like that. And then a red medication would be something that the client would probably ultimately be declined for, like chemotherapy or AIDS treatment. So they do gather information there. And then they'll also do oftentimes a separate interview. We we always explain to the client, you are asked these same questions anywhere from 2 to 4 times during the process. We gather that information to do our pre-underwriting. The examiner may ask some of those medical questions. The insurance company is also asking a question or using their third-party vendor to make sure that we're not in some sort of the agent's not in collusion or whatever in this whole thing. So they're getting these answers multiple places to make sure that they have the clearest picture about what's going on with the client. And there are times that in that last phone interview, something is revealed we didn't know about. So that's why it's super important that the client fill out the quote request, be as thorough as possible, because like I said, we're not a big fan of having surprises, especially at the end of the process. So we went over with the application process, the preliminary stage. Like I said, that's the quoting, our little interview, the requoting. That's where we do our pre-underwriting. Then there's the pending stage where the insurance company and the underwriter is reviewing all that information. And then and only then will an approval be made. So today we went over the purpose of underwriting, the quoting system, and the application process. Now I do have uh, several questions here. Yes, the slides will be made available on our website, I believe tomorrow, but certainly by the end of the week, I would think. Here, I've heard that it is worth shopping around because insurance companies may assess your risk in exactly the same way. But some companies might be, say, underweight mid 40s black women, so they're willing to quote a mid 40s black woman a little better um, in order to beef up that part of the books. Um, it's great to shop around for quotes. Um, as far as, first of all, we don't ask race, so that doesn't come into play at all. That's not asked on the application. That's not asked by us. So that definitely doesn't come into play. Whether somebody is age or underweight, that's in their guidelines. So they're following their guidelines. Like I said, what we can do is if an offer comes back different than quoted, and it was due to something we didn't know, maybe something in the medical records that wasn't disclosed, we can do an x-ray and what we call flip companies. So they can reapply with a different company and get a better offer. And we actually do that pretty frequently when an offer comes back different than quoted. Sometimes it's like, look, this is a good deal. This is the best you're going to get based upon that situation. But you're right, because underwriting guidelines are different for different companies. Um, sometimes we can go to another company and get a better offer. So, in a sense, we are doing the shopping for the client. Um, can clients tell you the information confidentially? Um, Anything that's told to us, if it's a question on the application, we do need to disclose that. So everything they tell us is in confidence, but that's a very good question about confidentiality. And we get this question pretty frequently about HIPAA. When HIPAA is between health insurance companies and doctors. LLIS is not covered under HIPAA. Life insurance companies are not covered under HIPAA. We all have our privacy policies that we can certainly give to the client and usually are part of the application. Um, their information is used for the underwriting process, but there are a lot of people involved. The examiner is gathering information, the phone interviewer, we are the underwriter, but it's all under the umbrella of underwriting for the application. You know, the insurance company and we don't certainly use any of that information other than for the purpose of underwriting. Let's see. Just to clarify, it has the potential to raise premiums to get. No, it's not. It's not raising premiums to shop around. Um, but what it is doing is potentially having somebody not receive an offer, first of all, and because if somebody could be overinsured if they're shopping around, um, and you know, possibly, you know, when you think about it, if 10 insurance companies are paying for exams and doing things and ordering medical records, and in the long run, if a lot of people did that and the insurance company is losing a lot of money because you know, policies aren't being placed because somebody is shopping around and applying with 10 different companies. It's just financially not an efficient way of doing it. Like I said, we can do the shopping form. When we quote and send information to insurance companies, we're already doing the shopping form. So that's what we recommend. Do you have options for coverage without a medical exam? Excellent question. Some of the younger clients, yes. Younger, if you're applying for 500,000 or lower, few of the insurance companies, even for up to $1 million, may be able to have their application go through what's called an accelerated underwriting, where what they'll do is they'll do a complete phone interview with the insurance company. And then based upon that information, they'll still run the client's name through a prescription database and do that. And they may waive the exam and the medical records. Somebody's 30 years old, nothing showing up in the prescription database, no meds taking, no diagnosis. You know, the insurance company, the underwriter may say, we don't want to waste money on ordering medical records and paying for an exam because the insurance company pays for all that. So they may just go ahead and make an offer. Good question. What happens when a woman is pregnant? Okay. So what we do when it comes to pregnancy is somebody can apply for insurance when they're pregnant, and the underwriter takes that into consideration that they may weigh a little bit more. We will not submit an application if they're in their third trimester. Reason being is that the process takes 2 to 3 months. So what's going to happen if they're due any day now, an underwriter is not going to make an offer. They're going to wait until they have their 6-week postpartum. Not only that, their labs may be out of whack. Even though it's, quote, normal for pregnancy, not all insurance companies are take that into consideration because they don't know. Is it going to go back to normal? Perfect example is gestational diabetes. Well, a lot of times, yes, it goes back to normal, but a lot of times it doesn't, and that person becomes a diabetic, so they don't know that for sure. If somebody's in their first trimester, no complications whatsoever, labs have been good, yes, we can submit an application. Third trimester, we say wait until your 6-week postpartum, make sure everything's back to normal, and then we'll apply. Does a prescription database include all prescriptions filled or only medications paid for with insurance? Very good. Very good question. I believe it's with paid for insurance. So yes, if you pay cash for your prescriptions and it doesn't show anything, maybe your doctor wrote a script but you didn't fill it, it doesn't show that either. So it's an insurance thing. And I'm not sure the VA actually, because that's a government agency. Any prescriptions written through the VA is included in there. I believe that is the end um, of this talk. There's a few more here, and I will reach out to those people individually to answer your questions. Again, my name's Jenny Stiles. If you have any questions about underwriting, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on the website, and this webinar will be uploaded in the next few days. Thank you.